Meddy knows more about football than harness racing. His football career spanned 312 senior games, 240 for Perth in the WAFL and 72 for Geelong in the VFL. He picked up a Sandover medal, the WAFL equivalent to a Brownlow.
Yeah, well, footy has been probably the thing in my life that's I look back with probably the fondest memories and think how lucky I was to play a great game like footy. It does open up a lot of doors for you, whether it's in future sporting involvements or in businesses. It's been very helpful to me. But as a game, I think it's the greatest game on earth, and as I said, it's been great to me and obviously to my family as well.
And the legacy of your loins, no doubt, with Ben, currently with the West Coast Eagles.
Yes, well, he was actually born in Geelong, Ben, so he and was a great Geelong supporter, as we all were, until the Eagles came along. But yeah, to have him, follow in my footsteps, I suppose, to play footy, but then to have done as well as he has been, a lot of enjoyment for not only me but my wife and my own mum and dad, and my wife's mum and dad, our family, because it's such a public sport, footy, that the whole family can follow it. Yeah.
What about football these days? Has it changed a great deal?
Yes, it's changed, I think, an enormous amount. It just worries me a little bit that it's becoming a little bit clinical, if that's the word. That I remember as a young player when I was playing, and I used to hear older players talking about how the game was when they played, and it used to annoy me a bit, but I think I've become a bit like it myself.
His interest in harness racing didn't really begin to fire until his football days were over.
It was just like a bug in my system that I always had a great interest in harness racing. I was lucky enough to see the great Mount Eden race, and I think that was probably, I still maintain it's the greatest sporting spectacle I've ever seen, was Mount Eden. And I used to then start following the trots, and after I finished playing footy, I coached extensively, and when I missed out on the Subiaco League job over here in the waffle competition, I thought, well, there's got to be life after footy. So I decided to have a crack at the harness racing, and my cousin Ian Gossage trained horses, so I rang him up and said, could I come out and annoy him each morning, and that's where it all started. When I went into harness racing, I sort of went through the reinsman school, and I sort of had to decide, I want to have a decent crack at it. So I went and bought myself a couple of horses, and Shaman Scanner was one, and I bought a couple of horses from New Zealand, a horse called Lindisfarne, and what was the other one, McCracken. And I was pretty good mates with Barry Perkins at the time, of Pro Chevalier fame, and Barry sort of gave me a bit of guidance along the way, and we won a few races with those horses, and that was probably the start of it, and I've just sort of kept buying them ever since, I think. And particularly fillies, I went to New Zealand and bought quite a lot of fillies, with the intention of them ultimately becoming broodmares.
Touching on those fillies, Cerebrano, one of them, and Shahaley and the Dam of Global Force, another, they've certainly proved their worth in gold.
Yes, well, whereas horses, and I think horse breeding is very much a personal thing of how you want to go about it. From my point of view, I just felt, because I sort of started studying bloodlines, that there seemed to be far more depth in the bloodlines of the dams in New Zealand. So I decided to buy, I ended up buying probably in the end 4 or 5 New Zealand bred brood mares. And Cerebrano has turned out to be a very good mare with a horse. One of her progeny had Lady Mary Claire, who won the gold brace as a 2-year-old.
But Lady Mary Claire is well clear from Chelsea Parker's lifting strongly under pressure. That's been a good run, but beautifully rated in front. Lady Mary Claire wins and wins easily.
They've produced some horses I've obviously had a lot of fun with, and particularly in Shahalian's case with Global Force winning the Derby, which was probably beyond anyone. You can't sort of plan to do those things. You need a fair bit of luck on your side for that to happen.
150 to go. Global Force leads a length. Ulrich the Danger on the outside. Global Force is hard on the whip, but responding on the outside. Ulrich is cutting it down. Global Force in front. Ulrich stride by stride goes to him, but Global Force got there, I'd say.
How important was that as a trainer and also as a breeder?
It was probably a far greater thrill than I had ever expected it could be, because leading up to the Derby, he was one of the favourites for the Derby, and we always knew he had a chance. But on the night, it was one of those nights. I had so many friends and relatives that came down that night. Normally, what happens in harness racing, when that happens, your horse gallops or breaks up. But we just had a night where everything sort of fell into place.
In this year's Derby, you went close to breeding the winner for the second successive year with Alberta Retreat.
Yes, well, Alberta Retreat's mother and Global Force's mother are sisters, or actually half-sisters, and I actually bred both the mares.
They're well clear of the others. Alberta Retreat tackled by Richard Henry. Richard Henry going home the better. It's a boil-over in the Derby.
I obviously was desperately hoping that Alberta Retreat would win the Derby from a personal point of view of breeding, because to have the mother of two successive Derby winners, you know, it then shows that that line is capable of, and even though Alberta Retreat didn't win the Derby, he was great in defeat. I think, you know, that is a very good line of horses, and hopefully we can breed a few and sell a few of them as well.
Bryan, it's a magnificent property that you've got here.
I was lucky enough to buy this property about 7 years ago, Wes, and we've got just over 30 acres here, and we've put in a jog track and a bit of a fast work track that we can do the majority of our fast work here. And I've got, you know, a lot of interest in breeding of horses, so we can have our brood mares and our foals and have a bit of room